Hey folks, we are back live on the dev stream. My name is Nick Taylor. I'm a lead software engineer at Forum. Forum is the software that powers dev.
I'm Christina Gorton. I am a developer advocate here at Forum. And today we have Ben Hong, who is a staff developer experience engineer at Netlify. Ben, tell us about yourself. Say hi, whatever you want there.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, a lot of my work is in open source. So I'm on the Vue.js core team and a Nux ambassador. So super love all things Vue, but honestly, just love building things for the web. So yeah, really excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us because I know you have a lot of things on the go. Yeah, like you're saying, so you work with the developer experience team at Netlify, and I have ideas of what developer experience is in my head, but I'm curious to hear what your definition is and what kind of your day to day maybe in developer experience world might be.
Yeah, so when I think of developer experience, I kind of like if I had like a 30-second pitch, it's like if you took a developer job and then you took a user experience job and then it had a baby, and that is
Ah, nice.
developer experience. It's because
Okay.
that kind of role is
Sorry.
because the role ultimately is about figuring out like better user flows and figuring out like understanding the user, which typically developer experience is for developer tools. But
Yeah.
then incidentally, we know a lot of it also interesting also includes like developer relations as well, as far as like creating content and outreach. And so I think developer experience engineers, at least that role specifically, kind of enters that kind of hybrid area of like we still do developer relations and advocate work, but there's actually engineering work done at the same time. And so
Okay.
typically like developer experience, at least at Netlify, is treated as like a separate team that has like insight into the engineering department as well as the product side of things. And so it's not
Okay.
necessarily like under marketing, for example, which might be more traditional for like developer relations and advocacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah. And so like the kind of things you're working on, like I'm assuming most people know what Netlify is, but Netlify is like it's a really great company where like I host my website there. I just find the whole like if you're into Jamstack, it's definitely a great place to be if you're publishing stuff. I just like the whole flow of it, like using like the Netlify CLI, just things are just really easy to do. I find it doesn't hurt my brain to get
Hmm.
something out on in the world. And so I guess like I don't know if you can speak to this right now or not, but like what's the kind of things you're working on right now, or are you focusing more on putting out content right now, or is it a bit of both, or
Yeah, so it's a bit of a balance. There's certainly like working on internal tooling. So,
okay.
as far as things right now, we're working on one of the offerings is like the on-demand builder. So helping people to like basically reduce times with static builds. And so basically allowing you to like dynamically determine like how, pages that are generated and then having a smaller build time. So there's like
Okay.
internal tooling like that, but then there's also the fun stuff from my end as far as like being able to spend time in open source. So looking into like Nux features, like Nux image recently came out and getting to build demos with that and figuring out how
Okay.
that works within the Netlify ecosystem and how we can ease that. So part of my role is like when I discover friction building demos, like that's when I can bring it back to the team and go, how can we make this
Okay.
easier, right? Less configuration. How can we default to some of those things?
Okay. Cool. 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 Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're mentioning you're part of the Vue core team. Curious how you came about to be on the Vue core team. I'm assuming it's like a lot of folks who that you initially contribute to the project, and then one day they're just like,
Hmm.
"Hey, it's time."
Can I put in a guess before you answer? Can I just guess?
Yes,
I
go for
I
it.
think I think Ben got asked to be on because he does amazing notes and amazing content that teaches a lot of people, and they were like, "We need this person to help us
Ah,
with Vue." That's what I'm going with.
That's pretty close.
Yep.
So I am on the docs team, so technically all the note taking and stuff is related. But yeah, similar to what you said, basically, like with open source, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the hardest part with open source is because it's basically done on your free time, that it like consistency becomes the name of the game as far as like showing up. And so a lot of people I know have a lot of interest in doing open source, but when it's like, well, are you about to treat it kind of bit like a part-time job that is typically unpaid? Like, I acknowledge that there's only like a certain amount of privilege and advantage that comes with being able to do that, but that's part of it and what makes it tricky, I think, for open source. And I think at the time of my career, when we were looking into like Vue 2 and helping out with that, like I had the bandwidth and the time to help with that. And I think that's, how I got onto the team.
Nice.
No, that's cool.
And we're at Vue 3 now, aren't we? You said Vue 2, but now we're at like
we are at Vue 3,
right?
which is so exciting.
So what are I guess some of the, like, because there's probably been a lot of changes, but what are like some of the notable like big changes between Vue 2 and Vue 3? I know there's Vite in terms of the build system, but that's kind of separate because you can use that elsewhere as well. So
exactly. Vite is more of an agnostic tool that Evan built. So for those who don't know what Vite is, VITE, think of it like Webpack. It's supposed to help you with your build tools, but simplified and leveraging the new ES build functionality. So things that used to take like 10 seconds to load are now like milliseconds long because of leveraging ES builds. But as far as the main differences between Vue 2 and Vue 3, honestly, it's more of the fact that it's been basically rewritten from the ground up using TypeScript, so that is much more TypeScript friendly. But don't worry for those who are like wondering, like you don't have to use TypeScript. It just means that using TypeScript with Vue now becomes so much easier. And then beyond that, we really tried to keep the API as standard as possible because we want to be able to leverage what they already knew coming into the major version. We just want to give them performance enhancements, as well as new features. For example, like composition API is probably the thing most talked about when it comes to Vue 3, which is a new way to sort of share state and to sort of manage your code base within Vue.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of TypeScript myself, and I can definitely see the benefits. Well, not everybody's like on the TypeScript bandwagon, I know, but I can definitely see if you've written the code from the ground up with it, you don't have to worry about managing like types in like definitely type. They just come with it because it's written in TypeScript. So no, that's pretty cool though. And what else was I gonna say about it? I honestly haven't used Vue myself. I think I helped somebody once on something, but it wasn't really Vue specific. It was more JavaScript related. But it from what I've seen though, and this could be a narrow view, it seems to remind me of like Angular like 1.4 a bit, or like the older Angular. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's totally fair. I liked it. My one-liner for Vue is like, if you took parts of Angular 1.4 and React, and then they had a baby, and like that is Vue.
It's always something having a baby.
That's what used to be my pitch. Yeah, there's always a baby. That's just what happens.
It's the circle of life. I don't know. Lion King, something.
But yeah.
Yeah, I've worked a little with all of those. I mainly worked when I worked with the Angular or Vue or even React, a lot of times I was working on teams where I was doing most of the CSS and other stuff, but I did work like with a little bit of all of them, and I can definitely see that like Vue takes the good parts of a lot of things and then even makes them a little bit better and uses them. So,
But I imagine there's not like
parenting stream. Someone said I didn't know it was a parenting stream today. Normally my kids are knocking on the door, so it's always a parenting stream.
Yeah. I want to see you get on the workout machine during the stream one day and just kind of go like Rocky, like while you're streaming, just pump out a few sets.
That's what my kids do when they jump in here. They run into my office. They sit here. They can't actually move it because of the weights, and so they just like shake it, and then that's what happens.
Cool.
Nice.
We'll definitely get to our big topic in a few minutes, but I'm still curious a few things about Vue because I haven't really used it. Like it's I imagine it's one-way data flow, like which got popularized by React. Is it two-way data flow or a bit of both? Or
Yeah, so it's basically the unidirectional data flow, but there are parts of it that allow you to leverage two-way data binding where it makes sense. So the most
Okay.
common use case in this case would be forms, right? You want to track what the user inputs and then have that
Okay.
update reactively. But for the most part, it does follow that sort of React model of singular direction.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, Christina had an amazing segue to talk about Obsidian before when she said you were amazing at note taking, but it wasn't the right time. But I'll pretend like that segue just happened again. So
Hold on, I can do another one here. So
okay,
I met Ben a long time ago at conferences. The 2 times I've met Ben has been at conferences, and each time he created amazing notes during the conferences that he then shared with everyone, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this person's notes? Go grab their notes. They're on GitHub." And wonderful. And that's how I got to know Ben, besides, just going out to eat and hanging out. And so yes, Ben is a wonderful note taker. Shares his
Cool.
notes that he creates, and we're going to learn about Obsidian and kind of how we can use that for different note type taking things. But yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get to it.
that's
Great.
my segue.
I mean, so to kick it off, when we talk about notes, honestly, I think the broader concept that's really talked about a lot is the idea of knowledge management system, because that's what we're ultimately doing, right? Is we're trying to manage the different ideas we have and how to keep them like up to date, really. And so most of us are familiar with the traditional paradigm of like opening a Word document, adding some notes, and then basically having individual documents for different ideas. But over time, what we end up finding is that how do we figure out what we wrote before, right? How do we manage all of that information that, especially as information has scaled, like it becomes really hard to do. And so lately within sort of the note-taking community, there's been sort of this idea of like revisiting maybe the way we've been doing it has been really inefficient, and maybe there's a different way we can approach it. And so let me go ahead and share my screen. So let's see if this works. All right.
Cool. Ooh, love that desktop background.
Thank you. And so for a little bit of context, I think it's worth, so I'm the kind of person that basically like I have bought all sorts of software over the years. Like I have tried many different types of apps and different techniques, and always what I usually found is it ended up coming short for a lot of different reasons. And so, without going, I have a whole talk that I did about this regarding why you're not happy with your note-taking app. But ultimately, what I ended up settling down is that with my note-taking software, it was important for it to be one, fast, like really performant. Because the last thing you want to do when you want to write something down is go, let me wait 5 seconds for the app to load so I can type the thing in, right? You just want to write, you want to go. And then more importantly, the other thing too, which I think is starting to become more and more prevalent to people as this becomes more of a topic, is data privacy. And it seems like such an innocuous topic because I think we're so used to trusting third-party services with our data. Because, so you just sync it to the cloud, right? Like everyone's familiar with that term. But for the first time, as people start really investing in notes, for example, with Evernote and a lot of these other companies, a lot of times people are putting quite private information on here, especially if you're using it for journaling and that kind of stuff. And then the question ends up boiling down to, at what point are we protected from these companies doing unethical practices? Because I've seen actual like memos of like VCs who invest in these note-taking apps, especially some of the newer ones, and their goal, which is clearly stated, is like they want to mine the data for like, advertisement, like they have an intention to eventually mine the data. And that's when you kind of go, well, wait a second, like this isn't right. Like I want software to facilitate my ideas. I don't want to feed someone else's big machine for this stuff. And so so this is where I think Obsidian kind of enters the picture. So wait, where is it? Here we go.
That is something I think about. Someone mentioned Notion.
Those,
I think about that a lot with Notion because I use Notion a lot. And for a while, I was even using it as like a, instead of like creating a website, because when I was looking for jobs real quick, I was using it as like a resume. So then there is more sensitive like information on there and stuff. And then you're just like, something to think about when you're using those types of things. Yeah, it's a good point.
Well, actually, it's funny you bring up Notion because I'm also actually a huge Notion fan and loved it since the beginning. But I think one of the things I ran into over time is, one, you start to realize when you have everything when you bet everything on Notion, like there was recently an outage, I think it was like a couple months ago, and I lost
Yeah.
access to everything.
Yep.
And I was like, oh no, like this
Yeah.
sucks. And this is kind of what got me rethinking this. And to be clear, I still love Notion. I think it's great for a lot of different things. But when it comes to like the notes that I have in my head and the ideas, I'd love the ability to make sure that it's securely in my own, like I have control over this and not relying on someone hosting it, if that makes sense. So,
for sure.
with that said, so Obsidian, what is it as at the end of the day? Basically, it's a free application that you can download, and it works on. It says get Obsidian for Mac, but you can see here it has Windows, Linux, and like it has all those platforms. So you basically download the exe file, unpackage it, and then it basically works on top of plain text Markdown files. That's it. And the reason, like this sounds like such a simple concept, but the reason I think this is so powerful is because one, Markdown files are something that a lot of us, especially as developers, already understand, and it's human readable. Whereas, like, I feel like a lot of third-party services that claim that you have the ability to like take your notes out often have some sort of proprietary database versioning, or you need to understand how their JSON is formatted, and usually it ends up kind of without someone building a parser for you. It basically like it's unintelligible. And so for me, like the idea that I could just write Markdown and everything would work, like this is great because now I don't feel that ecosystem lock-in that I do with a lot of other note-taking things.
I'm gonna stop just for 1 second. Anyone watching this, can I just say one thing? We are talking about Obsidian, and we did mention like where you can get it, and Ben's gonna be kind of walking us through just like what you would do, setting it up and stuff in a little bit. So if anyone kind of wants to follow along with that, you can go ahead and download Obsidian if you want to. So just wanted to mention that since we are going to be talking through kind of some of that stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, that is great. Thank you for emphasizing that. We're gonna do like a full walkthrough and 100% want to show I think why the community is super excited about it and why I think it'll also be a great fit for the dev community as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, and also to be fair, there are a lot of other software out there that are currently like sort of like approaching note taking. This is just the one that after a lot of research, this is one I'm kind of recommending for people, and I'm happy to take questions as the day goes on.
Yeah, I am
cool.
Kind of curious.
So I think the first thing to start with,
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I am kind of curious. I mean, we're definitely going to dig into Obsidian. I'm curious why you landed on this one, because I know there's like Foam, Roam, there's all these second brain note-taking applications, and I'm curious why Obsidian's the one that clicked for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about maybe this term of second brain, because this might be new for people who haven't really spent a lot of time like nerding out this stuff. Like, what does second brain mean to you both?
So I talked to you a little bit about this, Ben, that I did read like the book a lot of people have read that kind of get into second brains, is like how to take smart notes. And for me, a second brain is just kind of one of those things where we have all these ideas, especially like I'm a content creator. I do a lot of content, whether it's video or notes and stuff. And I don't like, I can put it all down like as notes, but I don't always have like a way to connect things together well. Like if I have a bunch of stuff, and seeing like a second brain is a way to have notes in different places, but also see how those can connect together. So if you have a subject that you're working on one thing and then a subject for another thing, and then you can kind of see how those might work together and you can write and kind of go from there. So that's kind of how I see a second brain, but interested in everyone else's thoughts.
Yeah, like the way I see, I definitely see that in terms of connecting thoughts, or like, you know, it is like literally, I guess, like neurons in your brain, synapses are firing, and you're like, okay, this goes with that and that. I think the other thing from my high level understanding too is I would kind of treat it like a brain dump. Like, for example, I use 1Password for managing my passwords. I haven't memorized passwords in a long time, but like the day when I said like I'm no longer memorizing passwords, it's like I freed up some RAM upstairs, you know. And so like I also kind of I feel like that's kind of the way it could be treated too, kind of like external hard drive. Oh, now I need to go back and then maybe, you know, okay, get refreshed. Okay, yeah, that's what that was, and then I guess kind of what Christina was saying about connecting things as well.
Yeah, I love both of those explanations. That honestly, that's what Second Brain means to me as well. For those, if you want like official resources, Tiago Forte is, I think, the person who kind of officially coined it within the community. And so he has a lot of resources on this sort of idea of Second Brain. And so, for those who want to do more research, that's kind of where you can kind of go to look more into it. But that said, you're right. So there are a lot of tools with this kind of second brain concept of how do we do a better job. I think, Christina, you said this best about how do we link ideas better? Because as we know, if you just create individual documents in Google Docs, for example, figuring out how to link ideas within those and then even like content within those specific documents can become rather tricky. And maintaining that can be a really difficult to do. And so what we want to be able to do is have software help us maintain these relationships, right? That's what computers are good for. And so with all these different software that are coming out, so let me, I guess, since I'm the one sharing screen, let me look at Foam, for example. Foam is an open source version of Roam Research. And so Roam Research is another one I'm going to bring up here. And this is like basically Roam Research is popularizing a lot of this sort of connected thought idea, but basically it's a web app version of, I would say, Obsidian.
Yeah.
And so for one, that kind of already explains some of the differentiation, right? Because for me, having local first files that you completely own is a really big deal. And to at least last I checked, Obsidian is does that really well. So knowing that now, it's basically like, well, Foam is this idea too, right? Because Foam is open source, it's local, you don't have to like run it in like a server or anything. So why not use something like Foam? Well, because Foam is entirely like open source, and I know the process of that, this does mean to me that it has this idea where you're like, okay, this means I can hack into it and I can like do things with it and extend upon it, which is really nice. But the one thing I didn't mention about Obsidian is that it's actually an Electron app that has a whole plugin ecosystem. But more importantly, there's actually a team that's basically, as far as I'm aware, they're paid to work on it. And so if you've heard of Dynalist, some of the team members from Dynalist, which is a really popular outlining app, they're the same people who are actually working on Obsidian. And so for me, this is fascinating because what I get now is the extensibility of an open source project where I can, and we can demo some of this later, like I'm already working on custom plugins for Obsidian, and I'd like to help others do the same thing. And then, but at the same time, you get the comfort of knowing that someone out there is a team that is paid and has an interest in like getting the latest and greatest into it. And so for me, I think that strikes a really good balance of like, okay, like I have like a premium product from like someone whose full-time job it is to pay attention to like the details of it and make it better, but then they still open it to me so I as a developer can still enhance on top of it. So that's why Obsidian ends up kind of making it like the top choice for me out of like these three.
That's what you get with us too.
You were saying about Roam. I didn't realize it was web only.
Yeah, so I don't think it's as it's at least as far as I'm aware. Last I know, it's not built for like just having like a folder of Markdown files locally and then just working with it. Although I do think it's actually important to be one of the benefits of Roam over Obsidian, though, is right now Obsidian is designed more for like your own thoughts. The moment you want to do collaboration, as we know, like for those of us who've dealt with sort of like WebSockets and trying to deal with simultaneous editing, it's kind of trickier to edit a bunch of local Markdown files with multiple people at once. I have a feeling they're working on a solution for this, but Roam does have this because Roam is just a web app, and they've already designed for that. Then it's easier for people to collaborate in Roam versus like Obsidian. So if collaborations is a really big deal and you want this type of feature, I would say Roam is probably going to be a better fit at this time. But for individuals at the moment, I do think that Obsidian would be the better fit.
Okay, cool. No, that makes sense.
And so before we want to get into Obsidian, though, I have a question, though. Have you all ever heard of this idea of an atomic note?
An atomic note? No, I mean, it makes me think of like atomic CSS or something where you break down.
Like literally one specific idea maybe in a note. I don't know.
Yeah, right. They're notes that kind of live on their own, and they can
Ah.
then sort of like you can build on top of them, right? Like they're the building
Okay.
blocks.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes.
And so I have a
I
little
haven't
bit of
heard
an
it phrased
illustration
as that.
here
I
that I
like that,
did.
though.
Where is the recent? Here we go. I don't know why I didn't. Okay, so let me. Oh, that's right. I closed this window. Okay, so one of the challenges I found with note taking here
Yeah.
is that you start out with this one note, right? And so this, if you can imagine, you're on Evernote or you have a new page. And so you're like, okay, well, I have the second idea and I'm going to link like this third idea. And typically this might be done in a single file. But if you're trying to be a little bit more, sort of like modular, you might create 3 different files. And so the problem is, though, what happens when these ideas start to chain off, right? Like idea 2 chains off to 2A, 2B, 2C. And then so now you might think that, okay, all of the idea 2s will just go in a single document and have different headings for the one. And you're like, okay, that's fine. That works in our traditional model. And similarly, you have like 1A, 1B, 1C. And you're like, great. But the problem is, as we know with ideas and as we start to mix and consider those connections, what happens when ultimately you want to start actually with 2A that links to 1C, that then links to 1A, that then links to 3, and then links back to 2C, right? With traditional document models, like this is incredibly difficult to do without a bunch of copy pasta. Like it's basically impossible. And so, usually what do, right? We'll like copy from 2, we'll copy these sections, we'll assemble them into a single document. And then it's like, okay, like this kind of works, I'll like accept it. But then what happens, right? Inevitably at some point, you're like, okay, well, I have this idea 4, and 4 also wants to use 1C. So then you're like, okay, fine. Then I guess I'll copy 1C down into like 4. And you just have like, don't even talk about single source of truth. Everything's just like a mess now, right? You're like, But what you really want software to be able to do, because there's nothing stopping us from this, is we want 1C. And so, this was to illustrate like 1C and 1A, they get outdated, or 1Cs get outdated. There's no reason for the notes to not have a pointer that still is included in the different like thought flows, right? And so this is a lot of what the sort of future of note-taking apps are trying to do, is make it easier for you to modularize your ideas so they can be spread out amongst multiple places, but still managed in a way that makes sense. And you have that single source of truth.
Someone in the chat, Lincoln in Fleet's asking, is this the Zettelkasten idea?
Actually. Oh, I'm so glad someone mentioned that. Yep. This is based a lot around the Zettelkasten idea. And so I actually have a quick photograph for people who are curious about this. This is a guy who's very well known in the note-taking community, Niklas Luhmann. And he is famously known for the Zettelkasten, which I believe it's, I want to say it's German, but I think I'm wrong. It might be like Danish. But all it means is note box. Nothing fancy. That's all it is. And so as you can see here, you see this filing cabinets with these individual index cards. So basically what Luhmann had did was, on these individual index cards, he would write this single idea and he would give it like this, like an ID. So then this is like 1, right? And what he would do over time is he would like link them and go, oh, well, 1 to 1.1 leads to this. And then he would like, you see that he has like that footnote that he like linking the notes together. And believe it or not, with this system of paper and pen and manually doing IDs and indexes, he managed to, he created over 90,000 index cards. And in the span of his lifetime was known to write over 70 books and over 400 articles. Like,
I think that's the important
part.
When
I learned about this, I was like,
that's the important part, because it's like, yes, you could write all those notes and that's great. And that's like yourself, but he developed this method in a way that he could connect all these things and use those notes to just like put stuff out there for everyone else. I think that's the really cool and important part of this, is like, it made him easier for him to put this information out there for other people.
And on physical paper, that's what's mind-blowing. It's like, he probably didn't smoke.
Yep, it absolutely is. But I think that's what got me thinking, right? I think when I first learned about this, is that like, if he was able to do this with paper, gosh, what do we like? Computers, we should be like miles ahead. This automatically manage this stuff. So that said, I think it's time I think we should just start showing Obsidian how this relates to these concepts that we're talking about.
All right, let's do it.
How does that sound?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. So, let's see. Where did my Obsidian go? Here we go. All right.
Oh, and I did have one
So, one of
question
the reasons I
before we
think
get
note taking
started.
in particular, oh, yes, please.
So the idea of the single note there, is that kind of like, I feel like this definitely ties into digital gardening. And like
Mm-hmm.
because we had Maggie Appleton on the stream, I forget when, it was a
Oh,
couple months ago,
she's great.
and she
Mhm.
was, yeah, no, it was a great conversation, and she was talking about her blog, how she classifies them like this
Oh.
is a seedling because it's like a new idea, and I'm curious if that's like the single note kind of idea in the context of
Mm-hmm.
digital gardening, maybe. Oh, yeah, there it is,
I
budding
love her
evergreen seedling.
website. Oh my gosh. So over time people have been kind of playing around with those ideas of like how large or when the note grows from just like something you just brain dump into to like a formal
Mhm.
idea and how they grow. But yeah, this is related to all this stuff that she does. Is totally
Okay.
related to this realm that we're talking about.
And I feel
Okay,
like the
cool, cool.
digital
Yeah. Oh my
gardening
gosh.
is
Yeah.
almost like, so if you have Obsidian or one of those like note taking, you're kind of doing this stuff for yourself, right? And that you can eventually like share your notes once you have something more finished. So like the essays and books that Lumen did. Whereas the digital
Yeah.
garden's almost like sharing it as you're going along. Like these are my thoughts, and this is like
Hmm.
their online, Obsidian or their note taking. It's like this isn't fully
Yeah.
formed yet, but I'm going to connect it in different ways, and they're just sharing that out already.
Yeah, I think I really love that a lot more of the community has started embracing the idea of digital gardens because it lowers the barrier of entry from like a you don't have to have a polished product to publish these things, right? They can just be
Okay.
thoughts and as she has budding seedlings. Whereas like I think a lot of us who are getting into like especially if you're new to the community and you're like getting into writing, it can feel daunting sometimes to be like I'm going to write a blog post and it needs to be
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
authoritative thing that like contains all the things. When digital gardens, I think, which I hope to see in more people's like personal sites, is like a way for you to just see like kind of what I'm thinking of right now, right? It's not necessarily polished or those things, but like eventually that habit of doing a digital gardening make it a lot easier to build up into those blog posts, those essays and articles. So
Yeah.
for those in the community who are looking to start doing this kind of stuff, this is totally where I recommend starting.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool, cool.
Yeah. Cool. So with that, yeah, again, always feel free to interrupt me if y'all have any questions or comments, because sometimes I know I'll get into a rant. Um, but okay, let's take a look at Obsidian. So here I have the sort of Obsidian dashboard as far as like what you'll see when you first download and open Obsidian for the first time. And what you see
Mhm.
is
Okay.
basically that you can open up existing folders, or there's this term called a vault. All a vault is just a folder of Markdown files. That's all it
Okay.
Okay.
means. And so what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a new one so that we're all on the same page together. So I'm gonna
Cool,
call
cool.
this the Practical Dev Stream. And then we're just gonna put it right on the desktop. We're not even gonna put it anywhere fancy. And then let's go ahead and
Okay.
create that. And so to show you like what exactly happened here, you'll see that on my desktop, I just have a folder in here. And then let me go ahead and actually just create a new file real quick and just be like my first note. This, this is my note. You'll see that
Okay.
from a like technological perspective, it's really not that fancy. There's just some
Yeah.
markdown file in here.
Yeah.
That's my first note. That's all that's happening right now.
Okay.
And so, I'm gonna assume a little bit of markdown knowledge here, but basically for those who are new to markdown, it's basically just a way for you to indicate different stylings using text flags. So in this case, here's my list. And then here is like this is my bold word. So you can see that there's basically different syntaxes for how things are gonna be displayed.
Mhm.
And so to show you what I mean by that is, so this is basically your markdown editor mode. You're just editing your text. And what you
Okay.
can do is you can switch it to preview mode. So if I click on this button right here and go to wait, let me go do this. Toggle preview mode.
Okay.
You'll see that this is like the properly rendered. So this is kind of what you would expect to see on the website. And and that in its simplest form, this is what Obsidian is. It's basically a glorified Markdown editor. Granted,
Mhm.
there are more features I'll show you shortly, but
Yeah.
I think this is
Yeah.
the most important thing is that it's not much more complicated than this.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
now if we're like, oh, we talked about Zettelkasten, right? We can just be like, here, I'll just write a new note. Like we talked about, Nicholas Lumen, right? And then we,
Okay.
and then like, oh, someone mentioned something about second brain. Like, oh, this was cool to talk about Maggie Appleton. Okay. So
Yeah.
at this point, nothing too like, this is fairly straightforward. Why is this interesting? Well, the graph view is probably the thing that we're going to talk about next, and this is what really starts to, I think, change people's perspective on how they think of notes and ideas. Because as we can see here, I just switched over to the graph view with this icon over here. You see that it actually shows us that right now within our vault, we have 3 different nodes, right? 3 individual nodes. We have the Zettelkasten, the second brain, and the first node. And right now they live independently of each other. But what we could do, for example, is let's say, for example, like when we talk to second brain, we can say like, hey, we want to relate this to Zettelkasten because they're similar topics and in the same vein. And so what we can do is I can go like related to, and then the way you link files between nodes in Obsidian is you use the wiki link syntax, which is a double square bracket. And what you notice that automatically kicks off like what the nodes that are available inside of your app. So here I can just do Zettelkasten. And here you already see, one, we indicate this link. And the reason this is cool is because I'm going to actually open up a new, let me open up a new, let me split vertically. And then let me open up the graph. You'll see now, let me see, display, let me thicken the line a little bit because I think line thickness, here we go, node size, and then bump this up a little bit and then turn on the arrows. You'll see here that all of a sudden, second brain is now actually showing a relationship to Zettelkasten in here.
Okay.
And this is like the beginnings of why I think this kind of note-taking is really the future for how we manage ideas, is because what you end up being able to do over time is start to like, this scales at an almost infinite level. Because what we have, one of the traditional problems we have with note-taking and the way we manage documents is usually you kind of force things into folders, right? So you might be like, oh, I'll create a folder. I'm going to call this second brain. And so I'm going to put my second brain here, and I'm going to put my second brain, Zettelkasten in there. And that's fine. But what happens, though, I'm sure we've all encountered this, where all of a sudden Zettelkasten really, like, what if we're doing a whole thing on like, I think he was a sociologist, whatever. So like there's a sociology thing. And then you want to be like, oh, well, what do I do now? Like, this is like the classical conundrum of like trying to optimize for structure and then finding yourself like, like it doesn't fit everywhere. Which is this. And so here's the thing, right? With this sort of relationship hierarchy, you stop worrying so much about how you organize things and let things surface organically. I think that's really the key to exploring ideas. And the reason we take notes is so that we can, over time, see how relationships surface organically. So, for example, one of the things I can do is also like, let's say Maggie Appleton, right? We want to refer to her because in the future, we know she's great and we want to like link her in. So what you see here is I've created a link for Maggie Appleton, but I haven't created a file for it. Yet, even though I've done that, you'll notice that Obsidian has already detected that there's a relationship that exists here, which is super cool. Because now, if over here, we're just like, also mentions Maggie, right? Maggie appears in my autocomplete. And now, all of a sudden, first note is also linked to Maggie. And then like, this is great. And then more importantly, when we're ready to create the Maggie Appleton note, and so you see here, if I search for Maggie Appleton, you'll see that in this icon over here, it says that it's not yet created, but we know that it exists in like somewhere in your notes, you've talked about Maggie before. This is awesome because now we can be like, all right, so I'm going to open a Maggie note and has this awesome website. And I'm just going to like quickly copy your website in here.
That is so cool.
And now all of a sudden, right, you see now, like you can see how like, where did Maggie get mentioned before? And the beautiful thing about this is that you don't have to think about this. It's just done for you. And so anyways, first thoughts, impression, I guess we'll stop here for a little bit.
Well, one of the things I really love is like, and they talk about it with Lumen and the Zettelkasten, is that he wasn't like he didn't know all of these things. I think he was like a sociologist maybe, but he wrote papers on all kinds of other things because he did these
Yeah.
types of things. He was able to create notes
Yeah.
and connect stuff. And then he became like what was an expert in these other things because he just connected all these notes. And I really love the ease of being able to, just like you were showing the little, animation before, what happens when you have this note and this note and this note and you want to connect them. The ease of being able to connect them like that is just so nice. And yeah, I really appreciate that about like Obsidian
Yeah.
and these other kinds of second brains.
I really like how you just created Maggie Appleton and does it. And the cool thing about that is, yes, you can create this note, but you don't have to either, right? Like, or at least right away.
Yep.
So like, you could just say like, I think what I like about this so far from what I'm seeing is it's literally like, just throw a bunch of things out there. You don't have to organize it now. It could be completely random thoughts and you can just put them out there, and then like whenever you get around to it, because there's no rush, then you can start organizing it or linking things. And yeah, that's the way I see it, because like I know, at least for myself with note taking, I mean, I can take notes, but I really don't think I'm great at note taking. And I feel like something like this would, because I do have random thoughts a lot, and I'm like, yeah, I should do this or that. And I feel like this is kind of the model where that would probably capture my ideas better, at least the way my brain works so far.
Yeah.
I have one thought on this.
That's one of the,
Go
ahead.
ahead, Ben. Sorry,
Yeah,
we
please.
kind of cut off a little there. And so you can go first if you want.
No, no.
Okay.
After
All
you.
right, I'll go. Okay. I was just wondering your thoughts on like, so with the, like, say the book, How to Take Smart Notes, or other things like that, where they talk about note taking, they talk about the importance of like really thinking, not just not to go against anything you just said there, Nick, not throwing this out there at
Yeah.
that, but not necessarily just like putting whatever you want, but to really think about like what you're reading. Don't copy like, exactly what you see word for word. Think about it and put it in your own words to like really understand it. I just wonder like what your thoughts on that and how you kind of tend to take notes in that way, if you do.
Yeah. So I think this is an important thing to talk about, especially for those entering the note-taking space. And I had a note on this earlier. I think when most of us think about taking notes, most of us are used to the idea of a context of like academia, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't need to take notes anymore. Like, I'm not taking a class. I'm not. And so I think that's why I mentioned this term earlier. It's more about knowledge management and idea management, less about like, oh, I'm taking notes on something. And so I think with some of these, call it more, I'll call them structured approaches to note taking. I found that people who end up, for the most part, people find that it's too rigid in the end.
Yeah.
Because you find like
Okay.
yourself just trying to abide by rules when really ideas and inspiration, they just come. And so when it does, and that's why I like what Nick was saying earlier, just brain dump. It's okay
Yeah.
to just go through and just like talk about like, yeah. And like, so this was cool to talk about, so I would say like how to take smart notes. And like, what about other paradigms?
Yeah.
And so the neat thing now is that like over time, what we can do is this is why like the other part to note taking and management is spending time to sort of look at your notes and figure out like how things are going. Because sometimes you want to actually process it and refactor it, basically. And note refactoring is something I'm going to be showing later. But before I get onto that, actually, what I want to show though is that, all right, let me just do this real quick. Here we have some stuff, and I've showed you how to link things. And so this is already a cool part of Obsidian, right? The fact that we can manage relationships. But what if we wanted to, I talked about earlier in that atomic note concept, what if we wanted to reference a part of a note, right? So if let's call it my second note, I really want to reference the contents in my first note, right? So typically we might be like, oh, well, let's say there is content in my first note that I'm interested in. And so when you're looking at this from like a display perspective, you'll see that it's just a link. But what if we could instead embed the note directly into the note? Okay. Now, all of a sudden, you really do have that concept of single source of truth. Because now you notice here, it even has the link. So if I click on this link, it'll actually take me directly back to first note. Now, some of you are probably thinking though, like, this is cool, but I don't want all of this. Like, what if I just want the content? Like, this is a lot of noise.
Mhm.
That's fine. Obsidian actually lets you dive down into the block
Oh, no
level,
way.
so that I can be
Whoa.
like, I just want the content under the H2,
Okay.
and then that's all I need. Boom, done.
Nick and
It's
I are both
integrated.
like,
And I
Yeah.
think this
That's
and I
pretty
think
wild.
the simplicity in this model to me is what makes this beautiful. Because all of a sudden you're not forced to like, oh, I need to create a note. And if you're like, you know what, Ben, I don't want the heading. I literally just want the line that mentions Maggie. Okay.
Okay.
There is a caret symbol that will take you to the block level. And now it'll actually create, and so I'll show you how this works in a second, but you'll see, now it only mentions that specific block. And so when I say,
Okay.
oh, by the way, when I say block, for those who aren't familiar, it's basically just any new line is considered a block.
Okay.
And so you'll see here, like, what it does here from like, if you're wondering like, oh, this looks different, right? You see this like custom hash right here. You're like, that looks weird. What Obsidian does is it actually will create a footnote here that serves as a marker, so you know where it's heading to. So even so, some people might be like, well, that's an Obsidian thing. I mean, yes, but to me, this is legible. I can understand this, right? I can be like, oh, at some point in my notes, I've referenced this. And if again, let's say I need to build my own Obsidian in the future, at least this is like, again, I understand what was happening here, right? Where it was trying to link. And so this is like kind of makes sense. And so, yeah. I'll stop right there. And for thoughts
I
and
think
reactions.
I think I missed how you generated the footnote, though. I think when I take a sip of coffee.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I know how you can
Let's try
add
this
it
one
there,
more
but
time.
like,
So
yeah, go ahead.
let's do it again. My first note. And you'll notice that here, when I put the caret, it allows me to pick the block that I'm interested in. And so once I pick it, so I say I choose cherry, that's when Obsidian will dynamically generate that hash, and then also retroactively go back into my first note and append the hash.
Okay, gotcha. That's the part.
And so if I'm not mistaken now, if I'm in Maggie Appleton here, and then I want to also refer to, let's say, the same line of cherry, it will reuse that same hash that's found here. So let me can I open it in a new tab? Split view. So yeah, you'll see that this corresponds here with this right here.
Yeah.
And then it's reusable across your entire app, basically.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate what you're saying, that there's no longer any copy pasta. This is all references. So which like you were saying initially, I think this is a really, I mean, it's maybe not necessarily a new thing referencing things, but like in the context of documentation or note taking, this is like super powerful because you're not copying text. It's literally like I changed that idea and now it's reflected in n amount of places, and I think that's pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So we can create.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what other things can we do here? So like so far we've seen we can link notes together. So I imagine they can be unidirectional or bidirectional. You can reference snippets or full embedded notes within other notes. I'm maybe you'll get to this in a bit, but I'm curious about, like, this is great for note taking. But what happens at that point when you're like, I want to publish this to my blog? Now, I imagine you can use Obsidian as a data source, and then like somehow, I mean, depends on whatever you're using to publish your blog, I guess, but there must be some plugins that allow you to tap into what you have in Obsidian.
Yeah, so let's talk about publishing for a second. Publishing is one of those things that I think is I would say this is still being worked out, because I don't know if you all have noticed, but Obsidian actually is technically not even version 1 officially yet. It's actually only on 0.12, which is one of the reasons I think I'm super excited about it, because it's already so good, and they haven't. The team was like, "This is not good enough for a V1." And so, if you're wondering, they are building a mobile app. Like that's one of their like top things they're working on right now to like integrate with this. But so for publishing, they do have an Obsidian publish service. So what you
Okay.
end up getting is you kind of tell Obsidian where, like, what notes you're willing to publish, because that's important. And then what you get is this sort of generic theme where you can kind of walk through and like look at the different digital gardens. And so I'll drop this in the chat for those who kind of want to check it out. This is outdated because this is more me kind of playing around with it. But I think to your point though, I would like to see Obsidian be that data source so that in the future, whatever platform people are using to generate notes, or sorry, to publish their blogs, that they can then basically point to Obsidian and it would automatically ingest all the references correctly. Because right now that is not as easy to do. So that's one of the tooling that I'm basically working on to help make that easier to do.
Nice.
So usually at this point, since most of us that are writing blog posts usually are doing Markdown anyways, at this point, this is when I will just kind of like, this is where I will copy and paste into like an official blog, like CMS, for example. But I do hope to make that easier in the future.
And in regards to publishing or just in note-taking in general, like right now I've been using Bear for the past like year and a half, I think. And so you can have tags in there, hashtags, which basically it's like having a tag cloud on like your blog or something. Is there a notion of tags in Obsidian as well? Because so far we've seen referencing different notes or partial notes. But if I wanted to say like, I guess is maybe a tag like when you created Maggie Appleton before it was a file, is that a tag on when it's not a file or?
No, you bring up the next great point. So everything that's brought up inside of the links right here with this double square bracket is considered an actual internal like resource. So, an internal link. So basically it will reference a Markdown file at some point. But to your point, like what if we want to actually have actual tags? And that is possible. So for example, one of the things I do with my note is actually have like a type that I try to reference. And so this one, I'll say this is a type person, because Maggie Appleton is a person that I can basically reference over time. And versus like second brain, again, this is not how I do it, but let's say like, let's call this like, a concept. And so what's nice about this is, let me just go ahead and let's see, Zettelkasten, I believe I had done Nicholas Lumen. So let me go ahead and make him a link, and let me create him and make him a type person. You'll see that you'll see some autocomplete already happening, right, with the typing. So Obsidian does have the concept of parent-child relationships for the hierarchy. And what's great now is that I believe, looks like the tag is not turned on by default, or is it over here? Looks like it's not on by default. Okay, if I go into the search, and then let's go ahead and look for type person, you'll see that will bring up all the respective notes that are tagged accordingly. So it's funny you mentioned Bear, because there actually is an integration to migrate from Bear over to Obsidian. So one of the things you could do if you want to is just like test out like a Bear, just like import everything and just see what happens. And they have quite a few integrations as far as migrating from different apps into Obsidian.
Yeah, because because like just touching on note taking in general again, like I've enjoyed using Bear, but it's still like scattered. It's hierarchical or it's by tag. Whereas like I guess traditional note taking, because if you think about like table of contents and all that stuff, it's a tree structure, whereas Obsidian is really a graph like in all kinds of directions, which is I guess That's all
I have a quick note from the chat real quick. I don't know if you have anything to comment on this, but someone just initially someone mentioned, I'm really hoping they add a way to add a webhook to an MD note so you can have it mirrored in a GitHub gist. And then someone mentioned that they believe you keep your entire Obsidian vault in GitHub. I don't know if you had any thoughts or things to add to that.
That is totally true. So as far as syncing goes, right? Because you're probably thinking like, well, if this is a local folder of Markdown files, how the heck do I keep this backed up? Because gosh, I don't want to spend all this time and lose everything. And for that, I completely empathize. To the point where I have 3 backup systems for my notes, only partially because I just want to play with all the toys.
Okay.
But the first one I use is I actually keep all my notes on Dropbox. So Dropbox will automatically, so the equivalent of this for others who are not using Dropbox would be a Google Drive, iCloud, that kind of service. It just automatically syncs it to a third party. Second, what I do is there is actually a plugin for Obsidian that actually allows you to link a GitHub repo to the file, the folder.
Okay.
And so I think at this point, I think it's time for me to show my personal Obsidian. So just know, like full disclaimer, that this is another level. There is a lot in between this, but like if you're getting started, everything we've talked about up to this point is a great way to just get used to it. What I'm about to show you is just the insanity that I've taken it to. You do not have to take it to this point.
This could bring down the stream, so brace yourselves. Brace yourselves.
Okay. So let me show you let me continue the thought I had though. So there is a Git plugin here, Obsidian Git, that allows you to basically determine settings for like how often you want it to back up, how often you want it to auto pull, the commit message. Like you can customize quite a bit with it. And so basically this will allow you to automatically like sync your repo up into, or sorry, your notes into a repo, and a private one at that. So for example, my notes are hidden behind a private one. Anyone's trying to look at my repository. So that's, and the third way I do the sync is Obsidian sync, because I'm curious about their native offerings and how it works. And so I'm playing around with that. So as far as backing up notes, I can totally empathize. I have 3 backups. That said, I think it's time for us to talk about why Obsidian becomes really exciting once you start getting used to the basics. To start, I guess it is important for some context. This is my note system. For those wondering, there's a few in here. For those wondering, like this is really where that concept of second brain kind of comes from, especially when you think of it from the graph view. Like Nikki, you were saying about like dendrites and neurons. Like, look at this. Like, this really does look like things like connected in ways that you just wouldn't expect. And if you're wondering, the visualization of the node size, this is how much people have been like the note has been referenced. And so clearly I have a lot of notes with people in it that are referenced frequently. And then there are concepts of, for example, like orphan notes that have no relation to anything yet, for example. Yeah, exactly. And so
all these everyone in the chat
like, how is
saying
this
goals,
useful?
just so you know, Ben. People are like, goals, this is goals. We'll all get there eventually.
If it makes y'all feel better, this was an amalgamation of like note-taking system after note-taking system, and just like I'm just trying to carry them over. So I did not start from scratch at Obsidian and make this overnight. This was a lot of work over time.
I told you he was a good note taker.
Oh, I like in the comment Hungsu.
Oh yeah, asteroid belt there.
I love the asteroid belt comment in the. I love that. Yes. Okay.
The Big Dipper.
So here's the thing, though, right? How is this useful? And I'll just say, there you go. Let's say we want to talk about like Golang, right? Like this is something I've been studying on my back. What I've been doing by simply filtering down to this, you'll see that it actually can show relationships of like how things relate to each other with this kind of topic. And so what this allows you to ultimately do is start to parse, like as you're like looking for things and wanting to see relationships, it's really easy for you to like make those connections and try to see where or where not. Like as you can see, I have a bunch of Golang stuff over here that's not related to anything. And so this is one of the ways the graph can be very useful, because sometimes you just want to visualize how your notes relate to one another. But that's just like, this is just one of the many things. What I want to show you now is sort of the extensibility of Obsidian. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to say, let's do, we're going to show like my Golang notes. All right, so this is a new note that I'm creating. That's just a Markdown file. And what I'm going to do here is I want to actually, like, because we talked about, like, we showed you how to search for things. But as I think, as we all know, once you get to a certain point where you want to be able to query things, right? And so let's say, like, this is, like, again, the term of this is my Golang notes. And, like, I want to see the notes I have on Golang. So what I can do is one of the plugins I use data view allows me to actually construct basically a query. So let me just do a list of all the items that contain topic Golang. I'm just going to use the tag specifically here. And then what you see here is that, boom, I have basically using a little bit of like custom snippet, I have everything here. But then I can go a little bit further. I can say, you know what, I'd rather have a table and I'd like to see the last time these dates were modified. And so here you'll notice, boom, now I can actually see the last time these things were modified. And then you can even go as far as like, yeah, but I'd rather sort it ascending rather than descending. And then there you go. It'll automatically reorder that for you based on, in this case, it might not be. Oh, I know what it is. Sorry. Sort by file m time ascending.
Oh,
and then there you, that still looks wrong to me.
I think it
but
needs
anyway, so it allows you to do query
wrote...
languages to.
There we go.
Oh, you're right. M time. There we go. Much better. I was like, I'm pretty sure. Okay, of course it's me. As you can see now, and so what's cool now is that you have this saved view of how you can basically like see your data in a different way. So if you're writing content and you're want to see how things are inspired, you can construct queries to bring those pieces together, and then from there you can kind of jump into the next bit of inspiration.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very cool. I've never actually seen data queries in a code block before. Is data view specific to Obsidian, or is that like a code block that's available in other Markdown?
No, this is specific to Obsidian.
Okay.
And so this is where I think it's worth talking about, is that Obsidian, at the end of the day, because it's an Electron app, is kind of an open field for web developers. Like just green field ideas. Because, for example, this theme that I have is something that I custom built based on Sarah Drasner's Night Owl theme. And so if we go into the appearance here, you'll see that you can just create your own themes, and it's CSS. That's basically all it is. And so there's like different themes you can explore. So like one of the ones a friend of mine made is like Vileplume, you know, based on the Pokemon. And what's so great about this is you just it's like and everything is JavaScript, right? Like underneath the hood, they wrote it with vanilla. They wrote it with just TypeScript. And you can extend on top of it. And so to show you what I mean by that is, so here inside of my plugins, I have this thing called a view plugin. And so this is something I'm basically been working on to try to get people to have. And so I'll show you what this looks like. So view plugin.
Did you install the Fortnite?
Let me bring this over
you've got the
to
Fortnite
right. I do got the Fortnite theme going.
I installed it yesterday.
You'll see here that inside of this code. Oh, you did? I love the llama. The llama is my favorite piece. And it looks like she swapped in the alien recently too. It used to be a chicken.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm dying here.
But so I think for those like who are looking at the plugin for the first time, if you've done web development, this actually should look pretty familiar to you. This is a source folder. I mean, this is a view app, so that I have app.view and counter.view. But then all it outputs in the end is a main.js file and a styles file. And so to show you that this actually worked, so let me go ahead and do this. Let me toggle the view app view. You'll see that this is actually showing like oh man, the zoom is kind of weird on this. So let me go ahead, and if I go inside of app.view and I add my counter, so let me do that, drop the counter right here. And then let me just go ahead and build the app. Oh, what did it not like? Didn't like something. Oh no. Feature note. Feature note does not exist. That's fine. All right, yarn build. There we go.
Live coding, y'all. This always happens.
And now, live coding. Yes, it does. Woo! You'll see I have my counter here with like it's just a web app. And so what's really cool about this, and one of the things I'm trying to do, is I'd like to make the data easier for people to access. But imagine now what the possibilities exist. So to show you what I mean by this, I'll show you another really popular plugin, which is the Kanban Boards.
Oh, no way.
And
Okay.
so what you're gonna see here is let me start by showing you the markdown of this. So here, the markdown is fairly straightforward, right? You have headings, you have checklists in here, and you have, things that you're updating. And so using this as your source of data, your single source of truth, I'm gonna go ahead and open this here on the right. You'll see that with the UI that they built with the plugin, when I rearrange these things, it'll update the markdown automatically.
That's super cool.
And so to me, this is where it gets really like it gets me so excited because all of a sudden we have a way to manage data in a way that's understandable to us and legible, which is markdown files. But then if we can
Yeah.
leverage all the data schemas that Obsidian is doing for us, and then leverage that into like a web app that we can customize and we can like build like all these extensions on, like the possibilities are like, to me, like they're almost endless, and what I'm super excited about.
Yeah, and I think one thing about this too is like, say somebody who is not a developer, because like I love Markdown too, but like you talk about Markdown outside of the developer community, and it's a
Yeah.
little lesser known. But if you were to expose like an editor GUI, or like if like the Kanban board here, nobody has to know how that it's markdown under the hood, right? Like they can just say like, I want to work with this plugin, I'm gonna write my notes, and then they still get all the benefits of Obsidian, but like not being markdown aware, because that's not something they're really into. I think that's cool. And the other thing, like you were saying, I mean, this is much like VS Code. For those that don't know, VS Code is an Electron app as well. There's plugins and all that. Like I feel like this is
Yep.
ripe for being a web app as well. They were talking about like, having globally available notes, or even there's even stuff like, I think the company, is it StackBlitz, the company, how they have like, they can run Node and everything in the browser now with WASM and stuff. I feel like you could have like a portable
Mm,
Obsidian too. Like, yeah. So I don't, I just love web stuff. So it's
yeah.
pretty awesome.
And I think you bring up an excellent point there regarding Markdown and how it's, to be honest, I've met developers who also don't love writing in Markdown. Like they straight up, they're like, that's a deal breaker for me. And to that, I completely understand, because especially when you've been introduced to the really beautiful editing experience of Notion, for example, and how intuitive it is to like add a
Yeah.
table and then like create relationships, like that's the kind of ease that I'd like to see come to Obsidian. So this is one of the reasons why I always, like, as much as I'd love to recommend Obsidian to everyone, I know that it's still immature at that level. And so
Yeah.
on their roadmap, they actually are planning to build like a WYSIWYG so that
Okay.
you do have that kind of Notion-like experience when writing and editing, rather than having to deal with the Markdown directly.
Yeah.
But and this is why like I'm excited about it, is because they're clearly thinking about these things at different levels and wanting people to like play around with it and have different primitives, so that for
Yeah.
for those of us who still want to write in Markdown, you can. But I imagine when the WYSIWYG comes, it's going to be one of those like, would you prefer to open everything in the WYSIWYG first, or would you prefer to keep
Yeah.
it in Markdown mode? And now people can really
Yeah.
tailor their note-taking workflow to what works best for them. And that's like
Yeah.
one of my core beliefs as like someone who creates tools, is that like, if you can't let people customize it that so that it makes sense for them, then like you're gonna lose that experience by a ton. And then a
Yeah.
clear example to that here is that they do such a good job with their hotkey management here, so that any
Okay.
command that you want to deal with in here is a simple matter of like recording your key here. So now it's like Command K, but you see that Command
Yeah.
K has already been conflicted with another thing that exists. Like to me, like
Okay.
the user experience on managing hotkeys is such a big deal, because a lot of us as developers, we love hotkeys, right? We like, once we get into a flow, we want to be able to do things, and being able to customize that easily without having to like, depending on your operating system, you have to like go to keyboards, and then like, I really don't like doing macros on Mac, because it's so much work to me. And like being able to customize it here is huge. I hope that more apps start to open up their hotkey bindings in this sort of way, because I think this is, to me, this is like the future of giving people the ability to unlock their personalized workflows.
Yeah.
And that's
And
one of our biggest requests on actually dev that we get and we've had for a while, which is in the roadmap, is the fact that like, on dev it is Markdown. And and now that dev is moving to like we are forum and we have other forums and they're not developer centric, because we do get complaints from developers too about the Markdown. That's something we've really had to consider too, is just that like we can't expect everyone to be like, we're gonna do this in Markdown. So having to think of how to
yeah,
appease
exactly.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll at some point we'll have a WYSIWYG editor. It's just it's a question of finding the right tool, or you could build it out,
Yeah.
but I feel like it would be more of a third party kind of thing, because there's so many edge cases with like an editor, and people, there's so many editors out there. People have already come across all these edge cases. It's like, I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. But I definitely see it, like, if somebody's got some like photography forum in the future, they're not going to care about Markdown. They're just going to start typing in there. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, we had
But
someone in the community create a plugin, which was pretty cool. They're like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
I got tired of this. Here's a plugin.
But this all ties into what you were saying, Ben, though. Like, this is so extensible, especially if you're a developer. You can be like, I don't like this
Mhm.
experience. I'm going to
Yep.
create something, a plugin that will work for me, And it doesn't mean everybody has to use it, but if it helps you out,
Nope.
and if it happens to help others out, that's great too. But
Exactly. And so one of the other ones that's really popular, for example, is daily notes is really popular within the community. So this here is
okay.
actually a Svelte app. At least
Okay.
last I checked, it was built with Svelte. And so what it allows you to do is timestamp your Markdown files to specific dates. And
Okay.
all of a sudden
Okay.
now, so with we talked about like typing people. So I have Markdown files that are basically like daily notes. And so it allows me
Okay.
to timestamp them and put them in relation like along a time dimension in addition to other ones. And that's what I think
Okay.
is really nice about this, is that you can extend on the information architecture to whatever you need it to be. And there are no rules as far as like you should do it this way or there's a best way to do it. Just put your ideas down, and then as you have problems that you want to solve over time. So for example, one of the things I was trying to do is let's see, inside of my weekly editor here, you'll see that
Yeah.
I have a query here that will automatically look at the events I have and then like make sure that they show up within like the day, and then anything that's past will be forward for it. So there's a lot of programmatic things that you can ultimately unlock as well from like I didn't mention this earlier, but templating is a thing too, so that when you reuse
Okay.
certain snippets of code a lot, you can have that actually automatically injected into a page. You can do variables like especially for those of us familiar with JavaScript and like CSS and this kind of stuff, like Obsidian is a lot of fun to play with. There's just
Okay.
any problem you have can pretty much be solved, especially with the kind of plugins that exist right now.
Mm.
No, that's very cool. I'm still kind of blown away by the data view code block.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and
yeah.
this is what. Good.
Oh no, I just made a weird noise. That's all.
That excited. He's that
And the thing
excited.
about he's that excited. Well,
like,
check this though. The data view plugin even exposes a JavaScript API so that you can actually query stuff and then do stuff with JavaScript to output what you want.
oh,
Um,
nice.
and so it's one of those like you can just I love the community and sort of its desire to find ways to further enhance things and give you those tooling so that like if they didn't think of the way to do it in their way, you can still do it your way as long as you know how to write the code for it. And so gosh, yeah, I'm still playing around with a lot of this and figuring out what is the right level of abstraction and how deep I
Yeah.
want to dive from like a coding perspective. But it's been a lot of fun playing with this.
I can also see how you can go down so many rabbit holes. Like once you get into it, it's like, yeah, I'll speak to you in a year. It's like,
I'm taking notes. I mean, I'm adding
yeah,
pins and doing everything else.
yeah,
Hold on, let me go make my note.
yeah. I'm taking notes. I
That's
mean,
my
going on
that's what I have to
sabbatical.
watch myself with. Yeah.
I mean, you're
That's
totally
awesome.
right that is I would say the danger of this is like diving into that rabbit hole. And so I try to ask
Yeah, yeah.
myself, like a constant battle I have with myself is like, what problem am I solving? Like, am I just refactoring things for the sake of refactoring things, or am I actually helping myself in a way that's actually, impactful on my day to day?
Yeah, for sure. But I guess that's kind of like the developer's itch as well. You're just learning stuff, or
Yeah.
you're just really enjoying tinkering around, you know. I I feel
Hmm.
like others outside of the tech space would probably say you're wasting your time. But I totally can appreciate the like, hey, you know what? I know this already works, but let me try and do it a different way, you know, because it's just fun, you know. So
Hmm. Absolutely.
yeah,
And I think it's funny when it comes, what were you saying?
no, I was just saying, yeah, your coworker Cassidy's saying she just lives in the Obsidian rabbit hole now.
Yeah, a lot of us do. And so I think, for those who are new, if you're watching this later and you're thinking about Obsidian, like the important thing here is not to get like, is to understand like the power of Obsidian lies in this multiplicative effect. Because when you're
Yeah,
managing notes at like a sort of the document level, you don't really think too much about it. You're just like, yeah, like this works. I have folders for these things. But over time, if we're talking about servicing like ideas and inspiration and innovation, that'll often come from unexpected places.
Mhm.
And so I can't tell you how many times being able to reference a note later on, or just be like, my buddy Hung Soo has this thing that he said I really like, which is like, your note-taking system actually basically ends up becoming your personalized search engine. So when I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, how do I declare like variables in like, or alias right here in Obsidian? If I didn't have it before, I'll take the note on it. But otherwise, you can see it's actually helping me figure out like, you had this idea before. And so now I can
Yeah.
actually open it up and go like, oh yeah, this is the stuff I did before. Like, and I think if we approach it like that, we now have this not only helps me, prevent me from creating a new document with the same information, but also makes that information a bit more sticky because it like, then I'll remember the
yeah,
next
yeah.
time that I actually had found it before. And then over time, like, you can be like, you know what, in this file, for example, I don't always call it how to declare aliases in Obsidian. I'm actually going to
Okay,
also call it like just Obsidian alias, right? Because right now, if I search for Obsidian alias, you'll see that like there is a note for it, but this guide I wrote doesn't appear on it. But what I
okay,
can do, for example, and this is why so if from the alias perspective, I can say Obsidian alias guide. And so the file is
okay.
not named that, but in the future, if I'm like Obsidian alias, oh, I didn't spell something wrong.
Okay.
Obsidian alias. Oh, here we go. It's right
That's
here.
the second one. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you see that? Looks like it was a little case sensitive. Um, and so then your ideas, like that stickiness of ideas becomes much easier because you can just keep building on your existing notes rather than
Okay.
starting over from scratch every single time. And so
Yeah.
I've actually gone to the extent where I no longer allow myself to create a note. So most people are
Okay.
used to like when you're creating a new document to hit like Command End, right? And that'll be like your
Yeah.
new note. I've actually disabled that command because what I'm trying to get myself to do is before just creating a note, to just
Okay.
open up my quick switcher with Command O and then just start typing out the idea. Because this is where you'll kind of
Okay.
get that now organic surfacing of like, when I'm talking about variables, like, oh, look, I have all these things on Rust. And you can like, that like you get that sort of context, and then also you can then very quickly go, yeah, the thing I want doesn't exist. And that's fine because from this same topic, like if I'm like variables in TypeScript and it doesn't
Yeah.
exist, that's totally fine. But now when I hit enter, I can hit create, and now I have my new note. It's the same workflow technically as a Command N, but the difference
Yeah.
is now you kind of get a chance to quickly surface through like, does this already exist? And then if it does, or if it's like loosely related, how can I make it better? And it makes that
Yeah.
workflow just so much easier.
No, that's I like that idea, you know, like before you reinvent things, you know, go see past work. Uh,
I
I
just
did
want to
have
also mention before
yeah,
your
go,
comment, Nick, you can
yeah,
ask your
go ahead.
question in a second. I just want to mention that everyone in the chat says it's all your fault that they're all into Obsidian now, but in a good way. And that also you have office hours on Thursdays, which we need to grab a link for, and that people should
That is totally
be a
true.
part of. So
Yeah.
just wanted to throw that out there so we make sure people know there are office hours for Obsidian. Woohoo.
Yeah, that's
From
actually how I
Yep.
came
So I can-
across it. Yeah, I think I forget how I came across your stream, Ben. I might have seen it through Cassidy's stream or a link to it or something, and then I just jumped on the show one day to listen, and then that's how I discovered you were big into Obsidian, and that's when I was like, oh, we gotta have Ben on the show. So
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
yeah, the one question I had was in terms of publishing. I know they're still working on stuff for that, but what happens
Yeah.
with like say so like because before near the beginning when we were talking about publishing, you copy the markdown and just paste it into like whatever you're using. Whether it's like
Mm-hmm.
Gatsby or some other static site generator, and then your markdown's in there, generates it. What happens though, like say you have like your data view in there and all that stuff, the code blocks, like when you're in the Obsidian view, it's generating all the proper text in there. But when you want to say you want to copy one of those that has like a data view in it for whatever reason, or some other component of Obsidian that generates other text in that, how do you go about importing that to like a raw markdown, I guess, if you can?
Yeah, that is a great question. So let's take that. Did I already? Let's see. My Golang notes. I still have it here. Okay, to your point, right? So to visualize this one, inside of my personal site, for example, everything lives in this like content blog folder, right? I have a bunch of markdown files. So I'll just create a new my Golang notes.md, right? So this is in VS Code for those wondering on the right. So I have VS Code on the right, and I have Obsidian on the left. So if I copy this over here, clearly that's not going to do much for me, right? Because this is very Obsidian specific. So one of the things I have tried to do in the past is just drop it over this way. But you'll see that when you do this, it doesn't come with any of the like. It kind of works, but not really. Because you'll notice that like the markdown didn't come through and this kind of thing. So typically I will say I usually don't use the data view this stuff for like publishing. So I'm usually not like publishing the table or the list that I'm doing. But in the event, so basically for the most part, what I've been doing is just using the editor mode to copy it over. But I do think this is one of those things where like, for example, this is where a plugin would make a lot of sense. Right? There's already all this data here. So why not allow someone to export everything into Markdown? Because my theory on this as well is that like, if I want to import something from like, again, Golang types, like this right now is embedded in here on the view, but I should really be able to export this into like the proper headings and everything. So I don't think, at least as far as I'm aware, I don't think someone has done that yet. But I think it's just a matter of some programming, and honestly it is a problem I have, so if no one else does it first, I probably will try to take a stab at it. So
just hang out long enough.
So yeah, unfortunately the migration portion is
the
migration piece is a little bit copy paste at the moment.
No, that's okay. I mean, but this also ties into like they don't have like a complete publishing system yet, so I don't think that's a deal breaker. It was more just out of curiosity.
I think also with notes like this, you're gonna have like you have your little notes and your pieces and your things that are connected, but the things you're actually gonna want to publish, you're probably going to be polishing and putting together in a slightly different way, anyways. So a lot of the copy and pasting makes sense anyhow to just put it into something else. At least that's kind of how my workflow would be. But
and publishing ends up becoming a little tricky. I've learned to using even their built-in is that what you don't realize is the way relationship linking works is that at what point notes become something that's private and shouldn't have a link versus things that like should. And I think that is one of the things that they kind of need to figure out how to navigate, because in my mind, so right now what I've done in my personal notes is I have a folder called Digital Garden, and I say that because this is something that I know that will be public, right? So that was like the intent behind this. But that said, right now, all my notes really live inside of this Zettelkasten folder, and it's just a giant mess of notes. And so if I just publish that directory, odds are something private is going to get leaked. And so
Yeah.
to me, what I almost want to be able to do inside of a note, like call it, again, let's just say like my published note, is like, it'd be nice if in the front matter, we said like public true, for example, or to
Yeah.
make something
Okay,
intentional,
yeah.
either that or to set a private variable. And then what you would want then is like the scraper to know that, yes, this is linked to this thing, but because it's marked private, we're not going to generate the link for it. We're not going to publish
Yeah.
it. Like, that's kind of, in my mind, kind of the ideal is to manage it at that level from a permissions perspective.
Yeah, no.
But
Yeah, that makes sense.
just thoughts on how to make all this, because I would love Obsidian to be the single source of truth for everything and make my life so much easier.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to move some of my notes from Bear into here and just trying it out. And I feel like this is something that will probably stick with me. But it kind of brings up another point. Like you showed your massive set of neurons, all your notes there. This isn't like a like a 1 week thing and then you're good to go. It's like, I don't want to say lifelong, what could be, but it's really like a long-term thing. Like you're putting your notes in there, you're curating them. It's like, not to sound cheesy, but it's like gardening, you're trimming hedges and all that stuff, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it fits in with the actual the gardening concept. So digital gardening. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and the other, I think you mentioned digital gardening, and the one last thing I wanted to mention is that for those who are hesitant of jumping into another note-taking software, because trust me, I know, like I've done that leap multiple times. The reason I find Obsidian, I think, worth the time is because once you download a copy of Obsidian, you technically never need to download it ever again. So as long as you have a copy of
Okay.
it somewhere and you have a machine that can run it, you actually have a note-taking app that can follow you the rest of your life. Like, because if Obsidian decides to quit tomorrow, you're good. Like, this still works and will always work. And your plugins similarly are downloaded and there's like a copy of
Yeah.
it on your local machine. And so for that reason, if you're worried about investing in something else and then losing out later, I would say Obsidian has done a really good job protecting you from, basically losing that investment. So.
Okay. And at the end of the day, kind of what you said at the beginning is it's all markdown files, so you still have the source of truth of all these things. Like even, I mean, like say something terrible happened with the project, you still have all your data.
Yeah.
It's literally just raw text files, which are standard among across many tools. So, I mean, I feel like it's going to stick around, Obsidian, because I've heard lots of people talk about it for quite a while now, and the whole second brain concept. So I just have to get cool enough now and get really good at it. So
I do want to be mindful.
Well, if you ever have any
of,
questions, you know where to find me.
yeah,
I just
for
want to be
sure.
mindful of Ben's time because we did hit like an hour and a half here
Oh,
already.
no way! Wow,
Thank you,
time
Ben.
flies. Holy moly!
So I just wanted to bring that out.
Time
I didn't know
certainly
if we wanted
does.
to kind of maybe wrap some things up and kind of talk about what we did. I did want to just throw out one comment here. Someone said that I thought was pretty funny. They said, I'm afraid my partner will make a new note for each good or bad thing I do so they can look up all their grudges by typing my name. I'm not sure how I feel about being able to make a quantitative evaluation of how my relationship is going. And I said, that's a good use case.
Well,
That is pretty funny.
yeah. Well, you know what? I guess we could call it here because it would be a good segue to say, like, check out Ben's office hours.
Yes.
I'm definitely
Ben.
gonna pop by. Your next one's tomorrow, is it, or when is it?
Yeah, it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. Yeah, I'll drop. I'm just dropping the link again that you dropped there.
Sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, definitely check that out tomorrow, folks. I feel like there's a few people in the chat that have probably already been to your office hours for Obsidian. But yeah, I can't honestly. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour and a half. I feel like 30 minutes has gone by, which is a good thing. But yeah, I just wanted to say, like, it's just thanks so much for coming on, Ben. Like, I know you have a lot of things on the go. This was like super informative and really, really interesting to talk about. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention, Christina, or.
Yeah, I just also agree. Thank you so much for coming on. You all are in a great place if you watch this of like getting started with Obsidian. So definitely check out the office hours if you want to learn more. If you want to get to the level of like where Ben's Obsidian is, then His office hours are a great resource for that. So thank you again, Ben, for coming on and talking with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, we'll call it there then, folks. Next Wednesday, we've got James Q Quick from Auth0 on the stream, so
Nice.
definitely check that out. We'll be dropping the Practical Dev Twitter account. Will be dropping links to that in the next week for sure. So with that, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.